Hey everybody, this is Bill Torgerson, and we're going to work on creating writing territories today, and that'll be a starting place for lots of things. You could use it to think about future blog posts, you could use it to think about stories that you might write, research papers, investigations that you might undergo. Also, if you teach or work with clients, it's also a great conversation starter. So let's get going. And then if anything comes up that you want to get a hold of me or look at some of the other resources, handouts, videos, etc. Related to writing and teaching, you can find me at thetorg.com, and then you'll be able to get a hold of me and find other videos and so forth. And so let's get going. It's a list of questions that I'm asking you to respond to. So you might pause the video or the recording to jot a few things down, and then come back and go on with the rest of the prompt. So off we go. Number one, make a list of topics you know a lot about, or if that puts too much pressure on you, make a list of some things you know something about. So you don't have to be an expert, but just stuff that you know something about. So go ahead and jot down a couple of those. And I've got this idea, a former professor of mine, Sam Watson, used to say this all the time. He used to say, writing floats on a sea of conversation, and that works all kinds of ways. But one way that it works is you have some ideas about what you know a lot about, and then I jotted down a few for this exercise, and possibly some of what I say will help you think of some more for yourself. And I wrote down getting ideas for writing, reading like a writer, the novels of Nick Hornby, finding an apartment in New York City, developing behavior strategies for a 6-year-old, and running. So all of those represent research projects I might undertake, short films I might do, research papers I might write, short stories, blog posts. So depending on what writing I have ahead of me, what projects I have ahead of me, different ones of those from that list might be useful. Number two, list your identities or the main parts of your life. And so I'll try to give you just a second there to hit pause. And so for me, I'm a husband, a father, a teacher, a writer, one who exercises, a novelist, a presenter at conferences, a reader, and a social media user. Number three, make a list of places you know well. I know the town park in Winamac, Indiana, where I grew up, several of my childhood homes, I-95 north of New York City, where I used to do a lot of commuting, and the path I run several times a week. 4. What are you working on right now? Some examples from me: revisions for a novel and stories called Horseshoe, a podcast connected to Adam Banks' Digital Griots book, learning about iTunes, a talk I have upcoming at Kathy Patrick's Girlfriend Weekend in January in Texas, and final portfolios for students. And just to expand a little bit, the idea there is if we can make our work transparent. So I'm working on learning about how to do a podcast, and I could do blog posts or research articles or articles for journals connected to all these. So just to make my work transparent, and that could be some of my the online text that I publish. Number 5, make a list of topics that you wish you knew more about, or list some things you'd like to be trained in. You could go out and learn, maybe interview others, and bring the news of your learning back to your audience. And some examples from me, there's a man named Richard Nash who has started this journal online community called Red Lemonade. I wouldn't mind talking to Richard and publishing through a blog post or a podcast some of what he has to say. Writing collaborative ebooks, and I won't go on to explain all my ideas. How the internet affects the way we think, the future of publishing and the book, making short films for festivals, the software program Final Cut Pro. So those are all things I would like to know more about. Do a sample schedule of your life. Try out a weekday, a weekend, summertime, or a holiday. And the idea there is that there are all sorts of topics, almost every second of your life, right in front of you. And so just a little bit of mine. I get up usually around 5 o'clock, and I write right away, or I drive to work and I write. I drink coffee. I eat a Cliff Bar. I check email. I plan for a lesson. I teach. I eat lunch at the law school. I give feedback to student work. I read student blogs, and so on. And so all of those are, again, though there are short stories that I could write that take place there. There are research projects. I had a pretty good research paper about a year ago on coffee. So just the effects of drinking coffee. So there's all kinds of topics everywhere. And just by listing all out your schedule, sometimes you find things that you weren't ready for. Or you also, if you have students or people you're talking with, you can see projects in their life schedule that maybe they can't see for themselves. List some political, social issues relevant to your life. Some examples from me: student loans, still paying them; tolls; my trash; the food I eat; the stuff I buy; debt. And so I've created my writing territories. Now, what do I do with them? There are lots of things that we can do with them. So let me read number 1 here. Look over the words and phrases you've listed for topics for writing. You might see something that reminds you of a story, or you might find a word or phrase that triggers an idea for what you can tell your readers about. If it's something you want to know, for example, learning to use the software program Final Cut Pro, then you can take your readers on a journey with you. So the goal here is to go back into those words and phrases, and it depends on whether you're looking for a story or a blog post or a research paper project. What among those territories could you tell us about, or where could you tell a story? I could tell you about that sometimes children have trouble adjusting to kindergarten, or I could tell you a story where I'm standing in front of a window watching my daughter at preschool crying, saying, "Daddy, don't leave me." So, not that you have to do one or the other, but those are just some examples. So number 2, after creating the writing territories, here's 3 ideas that occur to me after looking over the territories I've just created. An activity about endings based on the idea that we can learn how to write from other texts. See if I can talk with Richard Nash about his Red Lemonade site. Write a story about moving to New York City and driving the moving truck on the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. So one of the first times I was in New York City, I was driving an enormous moving truck on the BQE, which is not a friendly introduction to New York City. So your challenge is to come up with 3 ideas, which you will put in a future blog post coming up, or wherever it is that you want to publish. And so number 3, something to consider. I think especially for teachers, consider the research question. I find this especially important in the classroom. I ask my students what they want to know. I see a lot of this in documentary films too. For example, in the film Food Incorporated, they ask, where does my food come from and under what conditions was it produced? So I think these writing territories are useful to a lot of different purposes. And so I've gone through and tried to list 3 ideas for writing projects that I could have, but I'm also going to add 3 research questions as I looked over my territories that I could undertake. I don't know that I will soon, but A, should I let my daughters use the iPhone? What kind of camera should I buy if I want to try a short film for a festival? How do I get a podcast on iTunes? And those strike me as sort of practical and maybe apolitical, but the students often, my students I work with, often come up with really interesting projects that aren't so just nuts and bolts practical, like do I shop too much, or how can I live my Muslim faith in the Western world? So there's lots of interesting, there are other interesting projects that I could share, and maybe I need to get out to you all. So moving on. Now here, I think the writing territories are something that I might come back to a lot, but for the immediate project, Write With Me Wednesdays, here's some directions for those of you writing with me in November of 2011. Do you want to post your writing territories? You could explain that you are going to write along with us and that you are posting your writing territories as a blog post. You could also probably post them as a comment to my blog post about the writing territory activity. So I think if you're in a hurry to get started on a project, then you'll do some blog posts within the next week, looking in those territories for projects. But if that's a little fast for you and you want to just type up your writing territories, it might be interesting on your blog to sort of have record of just getting started, that just getting started post. And so number 2, if you're willing, leave a comment on my blog that you are participating. You could post a reflection of your writing and direct us to your blog so we can see what you are up to. So tell us how the writing territories went, and tell me about this video and if there's ways that I could make it better. A little note here. I know that some people who have already commented in various ways through the initial Write With Me Wednesdays idea. I hope to still participate in this, and I've already got projects underway. I'm finishing up revisions on a novel. I'm looking to a script that I'm going to write, and also I'm halfway through a follow-up to my novel Love on the Big Screen. And so I think it's, if you've already got a project, as we move into the first part of Write With Me Wednesdays, which is going to be the idea of reading like a writer and opening sentences, you could certainly post some of like excerpts of a novel or story or whatever, maybe even nonfiction text that you're working on. So I think if you already got a project underway, then post an excerpt from that work on your blog and show how it comes out of your territories. Can we make the deadline next Monday? It's my goal at the moment to post something by next Monday that comes out of the previous Write With Me Wednesday activity. If you've got questions or comments, you can find all the virtual places I hang out if you'll first visit thetorg.com. So thank you very much for listening or watching this.